Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Adaptive. Today on the pod, I have Andrea Brousseau. Hello Andrea, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm just rocking and rolling. I'm lifing, as we talked about earlier. I like that word.
Yep, just doing life. Lifing.
Man, for anyone that knows, life is tough at the moment.
It can be, yeah.
So, yeah, we're all doing our best. But, for anyone that doesn't know, just a little backstory. Andrea was on my podcast like 2 years ago when I was doing my audio podcast. And so this is like a second rendition. So
yep.
we're gonna jump in, we're gonna have some fun, and we're just gonna keep it light and easy going. So Andrea, first of all, can you just tell the listeners who you are and what you're up to and just anything that you think is relevant?
Yeah, for sure. It's nice to be back. It's always kind of, doing audio podcast to video. Like we were talking about, it's an interesting transition, a little nerve-wracking at times. So I guess quick overview, I'm an above-knee amputee. I live in Terrace with my husband Caleb, and he's a quadriplegic now. We're just lifing, doing life. Yeah. Been through a bunch of different types of life transitions over the years, and happy to share stories kind of from the past and a little bit about where we are currently, and just I guess perspectives on disability and how that links into each different part of life.
Right on. Well, let's dive into some of it then. So, you're an athletic person. For people that actually don't know a little bit about your background, you actually went to the Paralympics a long time ago.
Yeah, back in 2010. I guess that's something I should probably mention. We were also just talking about how I have a tendency to not mention things, but it's often just because I kind of forget. So I was on the Canadian disabled, and obviously that terminology has changed since then, ski team. I believe it's like the para-alpine ski team now, referencing the Paralympics. And I did that for a number of years and competed in the 2010 games in alpine skiing. And then got to be kind of supporting the husband in his journey to 2014 after I kind of retired in 2011. So that's my sporting kind of background is centered around that. And then I used to do some basic kind of kayak guiding a long time ago, way back like prior to 2010, just like day trips on the ocean. And since then, I mean, my interest in biking's kind of developed into different ways, and dabbled in whitewater kayaking, just your usual stuff as well. Like, if you want to call it hiking, for me, it's more just like moseying gently, slowly through trails. Just sporting interests kind of progress. I think we also kind of maybe chatted about that, like how over time, that tends to happen, and it's a good thing to kind of explore different like modalities of recreation and sport. And yeah,
definitely. We just off camera we were talking about as things change in life, your condition progresses, your health progresses, you get older and stuff, you're not able to do the activities that you once did to the same level, and there's like a little bit of like grief and losing the ability to do what you once did. So what is fueling your motivation these days to like still do the sports that you used to do, but doing new ones as well, because you have taken up some new activities.
Yeah, it is funny how I remember leaving competitive skiing and just kind of holding the expectation that that's how I would still ski for like many years, and then but not being able, to put in the time and dedication that requires to do. So yeah, moving out of competitive skiing into recreational skiing, there was this difference in ability, just due to sheer number of hours and days on the hill, and that was like a transition to go through, to accept that my skiing would change when it wasn't the center of my life, and then yeah, just things changed based on disability and fitness levels and time commitments and life priorities. So yeah, definitely. At one point I was motivated, obviously, very much by being good, by being like the best, if you want to call it at that, and very centered around performing as well as I possibly could at the top end of my potential. And that was really rewarding, because really, like in any competition, you're striving to be the best, but it's like the best version of yourself. And wherever that falls within, your competitive range, whether it's locally or the world, it's still just your personal best. And I do really appreciate leaving sport with that perspective as well, because I think that helped me accept that my best in maybe other sports was definitely not even close to the best in my one good sport. But yeah, so I think over many years, because 2010 was, like 15 years ago now. That's wild. Yeah. You go through all these different transitions, and I've been trying to figure out, what do I want out of these activities? What's fun for me? What's not? And sometimes I do like to challenge myself, and I want to like push that limit. And other times I just want to be like happily in a little safe zone, like just loving it. And I think what keeps me motivated is the enjoyment, like the love and the joy and the fun, and in the flow to some degree. Like there's, I think, this concept that I really like around sport and different recreation and activities, and I'm sure it could extend to art and things like that, where there's like kind of like a flow state where you're operating, within your skill set, maybe even just right at the cusp of the top end of it, and everything just kind of like moves, and you enter this zone, and it feels great. And you don't always end up there, but it's a real nice place to be. And so for me to accept that stage, maybe at one point was on the race course, going as fast as I possibly could, like right on the edge of terror, but not quite, but like right on the edge of my ability. And then sometimes that flow state is, me and my friends rocking down like a little blue run and just loving life because of that. And so I think for me, it's that, the connection, the flow, the joy. There's like a freedom I find in different activities that's what motivates me to keep kind of engaging, and also to be patient with the bad days in sport, because there's always bad days in sport. It's never just like, oh yay, it's always forever great. Like, no, there's days where it sucks. Like my body's not doing what it should. I'm not doing what it should. I'm angry or sad or tired. But that like joy that comes from it, even if I maybe don't feel it in that particular day, is kind of what keeps me going. Because I find if I stop, it gets harder to start again. So looking for that connection, that joy, that peace or freedom, and flow is kind of what keeps me motivated to explore different sports and keep engaging in the ones that I have done, even if it's at different levels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something I want to ask, like for me, sport as I get older changes because my conditioning is progressive and like my body is changing. For a person like yourself, our bodies are always changing despite of whether we're able-bodied or like we're disabled. And we have a disability. With above the knee amputee, is there any like progression in like how that leg functions, like
Yeah.
its neuropathy and its muscular structure, like stuff like that?
I mean, yes, there is some. I don't think it would be necessarily in a comparable way to the things that you would be struggling with in terms of like the difference in function and the speed that that's happening. I think, you know, there is. I'm lucky in the sense that with my disability, with amputation, like, yeah, we'll see differences in function over time. But it will be maybe just more directly linked to like aging or skin health. And it might be like a little accelerated on certain fronts. So, like, for me, being an amputee since I was a child, I indirectly struggle with pretty severe like scoliosis and that kind of thing, which causes like, yeah, nerve pain in my back and all these, you know, kind of more like chronic things. And eventually, you know, my prosthetics are, I don't know if I have 100% the right words, but the way I balance in a prosthetic, because I don't have very much left at all, is I balance on my like ischium. I kind of like a bike seat. And then eventually that is going to wear down and wear out, and you have to worry about different types of pressure sores and abrasions. And so, you know, things like that can maybe progress or alter the way that I can function. Just like in my 20s, I could tolerate quite a bit more than I can now in my late 30s. And I see it in certain areas like cross-country skiing in my 20s. I was like, oh, I'll try dabbling in that because I could use like an aerobic activity. It takes quite a toll on my residual limb, or like stump, if you want to call it that. And now in my 30s, knowing that like my recovery time is going to be longer and any of these extra things are going to be harder to manage, I have to keep that in mind with like the intensity level that I do things.
Yeah.
But other areas are totally unaffected in any meaningful way beyond regular aging. So like I alpine ski on one leg, and my only limitation to that is my own fitness and age. So I think, yeah, I mean, I don't think I can, I think I can relate on some level, but maybe not to the full extent or degree that you would be kind of working through.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely different for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I think, you know, you kind of nailed it when we were talking about like grief and loss. And, you know, I've only had to experience that in smaller capacities, like for my own physical fitness, and through other injuries, like, you know, breaking my only foot. Like, well, let's not do that again. That was,
Yeah, that was interesting, right?
yeah, it sucked. But like, that was quite a long time ago. And then like grief and loss, you know, kind of as, I don't want to say fully indirectly, but, you know, with Caleb going through his new injury, being a quadriplegic, we've had a lot of that, you know, this is what we used to have, how it used to go. And that's not going to be a thing necessarily. So how do we grieve that loss and then, you know, and build from there, so that it's not just this focus on what's going away, that it's kind of like you still have to like acknowledge it and work through the feelings. But I also find having that balance, having a counterbalance of like, okay, so it can't be that, like, what can it be? Can it be anything else? And maybe it's a whole different activity, or maybe it's the same activity differently. Yeah. What do you find with that? How do you choose to kind of, I don't know, work through that in your life?
Work through like the
Change in function,
the change in function. Yeah, it's something that I'm really battling with at the moment, because I found, or I now see quite a significant shift in my ability to do sport like snowboarding and mountain biking that I've done for so long. Like, it's changed quite rapidly between like 34 and 38, which I am now.
Yeah.
I don't have the same endurance or leg strength for snowboarding like I used to. I tire more quickly, and I find that it's more difficult. And I really have to the conditions have to be right for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another thing, is picking your days.
Yeah, picking your days.
Yeah.
Because I used to just go every day, no matter what the conditions were like. And I would deal with the bad conditions, and I would maybe do 1 run or 2 runs. But now I'm like, I like the good days where there's good visibility, there's good groomers, or it's a good powder day.
Yeah, or it's the right temperature of snow. It's not that heavy, just muck that you have to work through sometimes here.
What do they call it? Potato snow?
Yeah, it's like mashed potatoes, and you're just, I'm kind of the same, like where I used to power through those days, and now I'll sit there and kind of be like, well, do I feel like a fitness day, or do I just maybe want to wait until we get good snow?
Yeah.
But it's so funny because like I've also found sometimes making those choices makes me like angry, and there's this like deep kind of hard anger that like I've had to try and reconcile with and try and like tamper down, kind of, because again, I think maybe that's the tie into the loss, is I used to be able to do this, I want to be able to do this, and sometimes through no fault of my own, through no lack of trying or lack of trying to keep fitness, there's just certain factors that are now preventing it, and that it links, for me at least sometimes, the anger links to a sense of helplessness, and I very much dislike that. And so how do I
like that? Yeah, helplessness. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah. And then it's like, how do you deal with that? How do you change that so that you feel, or so that I feel more in control and less, and don't get stuck in that. So there's, and that's where, for me, it's like reframing it. So if I'm up there and I'm trying to ski the mashed potato snow, and my 39-year-old leg is dying, and I sometimes have to just sit back and be like, I don't want to be angry right now. I don't maybe instead of trying to rocket down these like black runs in difficult snow, I'm gonna go ski some groomers, because I like carving turns. I like the way that feels too.
Yeah.
And like for me, I'll try and reframe to like what I want to feel. What's gonna make me try and be happy? What do I need in that moment? Like, do I need to be feeling this like leg burn and tears in my eyes about the fact that I can't ski the way I want to, or the way I used to? Or do I want to like go ski fast on some groomers and, have a nice hot chocolate at the end of the day and get home feeling like tired and happy? Like, and it's trying to be okay with that compromise, I think, for me at least. That's what helps me like exit the anger.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking back to like this past year of mountain biking and stuff, and just learning to accept adventure in different ways. Not bombing down the black or the harder blue runs and putting myself at risk for injury. Going and doing the easier runs like the greens, and just enjoying the fact that I'm out on my mountain bike, and I'm either with myself, which I love just doing things by myself, and I usually have my dog with me, or I'm with friends. And I think the other thing too is I was worried that my friends might not want to do activity at my level.
Yeah, it's scary because some people won't.
Yeah.
So, like a lot of people will, but there's a handful that won't.
But there are a lot of people that are like I have a few friends that are very hardcore mountain bikers. They're at a high level, but they love coming and doing just the easier trails with me.
And I feel like that comes from maturity too, to a degree. Because I also have a handful of friends that do ridiculous things on bike. Like I will not have a chance. I don't even know if I could walk or hop my bike down half the junk that they're doing. But like, yeah, they'll come rock a green with me because the purpose at that point is fun.
Yeah.
Like it's so that it's fun.
It's that social connection.
Yeah. And like I find like maybe in my 20s, that would be harder for people to like make that shift. Maybe not for certain people. Some people are like have a personality where they have no problem doing that. Some of my more competitive friends, they do struggle to tone her down a bit.
Yeah.
And I get it. But I find like, yeah, in my 30s, there's a bit of a shift where, yeah, like we can come together as friends and be like, oh yeah, okay, like, you know, the intent of this ride is fun. It's not to be going as fast as possible or jumping on everything or off of everything or yeah. So it's nice to see that there's a connection beyond that. Cause I think sometimes also I've wondered if I over-identified with one sport or another and made that, you know, too much of my identity, then if that ever was to stop, it would be exceptionally difficult to transition to something else because there might be losses like on the social side.
So is that something, because it's something I've thought about, like if you were to lose an activity, like say mountain biking or skiing, that is a big part of your identity. Have you ever thought about like other activities or hobbies that you'd be interested in doing? Like you have started doing paragliding.
Yeah, I know. Weird transition. Yeah, that was.
I didn't even mean to do that.
No, but like, yeah, it's funny. Like, oh yeah, I chose to take up paragliding in case my body gives out skiing, or biking. I don't know how much logic, but yeah, I mean, I think for me, I've actually really enjoyed. This is the first year that I got to. Like Caleb and I took the time to make sure there was a dedicated time for me to try and learn paragliding and learn about more about the sport, like from a personal level, where for the last kind of year or two, it's been a lot of trying to get him set up and me providing as much of the support role in that as I can. And basically kind of this year, he hit that stage where he was able to, he had learned a bunch about the sport and had progressed to flying kind of like solo on radio. And at that point it was like, okay, now we can create the space for me to dabble in this sport. He's gone through a lot of loss. I'm sure he'll speak to that more. And paragliding was one sport that was still kind of available. And yeah, I don't want to speak to his story too much because that's for him. But yeah, I definitely at first was like, really this? Okay, cool. But there's a lot of really, cool programs. There's a lot of, people talk about a lot of like risk in sport. And I like to talk about risk management. And there's a lot of that in paragliding. There's obviously some unmanageable risks, like just like any other sport, everything has risks that can be managed and some that come out of nowhere. Well, maybe not out of nowhere, but that are less anticipated. But yeah, so for me, I was motivated by two different things. Caleb and I kind of lost a bit of skiing together. He can still get up and ski with assistance, but it's different. It's not what it was before when we were both ex-national team athletes. And, it was one way, we met on the ski hill, we met in a competitive setting. And we held that in our lives as a joint activity, in addition to other activities, but kind of as something we could always return to connect with each other. And, yeah, so, losing that had us trying to find, what activities could we do together that are still somewhat independent, right? Like it's sometimes kind of sucky to always have to do an activity like with somebody else. so what's like kind of independent, but that we can engage together in. And so we dabbled, like, I'd show up to wheelchair rugby with him and they'd let me play, even though I'm like definitely way, like I'm only one limb affected. You need 3 limbs affected.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Fun
okay.
fact. So yeah, with wheelchair rugby, you have to have at least 3 limbs affected by something.
Oh, I guess that's why I didn't ever think about this. Sorry to interrupt, but I've gone and played wheelchair rugby with Caleb, and he said that I would actually be able to partake in it as like a competitive activity.
Yeah.
But I guess with my peripheral neuropathy, I have 4 limbs
Exactly.
affected.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So 4 limbs affected, you would be a prime candidate for rugby.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just engaged because I'm a bad spectator. And they were cool with it. So, and we played, with that, with skiing, with versions of biking, and paragliding came up, and it gets us back in the mountains together, which is somewhere we enjoy being. It's outside, which is something that's of value to us both. We find a lot of calmness and being kind of in the outdoors. And then there is an element of like adventure and focus and kind of, I don't know how else to say it, but like bilateral movement, like you're engaging with both hands in different time and space kind of parameters when you're doing the sport. So there's a lot of points of paragliding that actually do kind of hit what we were hoping for, but there's no guarantee I'd actually like it.
Yeah.
And then when I did get to try it this year, I realized that I really like it. And I was kind of relieved that I did, because, it's otherwise we'd have to kind of it would be good for him, and then I'd have to keep exploring maybe other options. And no, I really like this sport. It's wild. I didn't really believe that I'd like it, and I was a little nervous that I'd like be maybe not level-headed in the air or something.
Okay.
I mean, right? I feel like that's a really important quality.
Definitely.
Because the consequences are kind of high if something like if you're not. It feels like, to me, the first couple times I did it felt like that floating feeling from powder skiing, except in multiple dimensions. Like you're floating because you're literally floating, and then you can kind of like do these like turns and stuff, and it feels a bit like that. And so I really enjoy that. I enjoy like the focus. I enjoy the feeling attached to it. I'm really enjoying learning a new sport, like from zero at 39. It's different. But I've had some really good teachers, and I think this could be something that we like carry forward, kind of with us, into the future as our sport that we do.
And there is paragliding here in Terrace. There's a community. So can you just touch a little bit on how you kind of got into it? You obviously got into it through the paragliding community here in Terrace.
So I think like Caleb kind of got his introduction with a bunch of the guys that paraglide here, and they, I believe, were on a trip somewhere. I think Colombia. Yeah, they were on a trip to Colombia. And they had the adaptive trike at this location, and they brought that information back, and we're talking to Caleb about trying out the sport because, here's this way to actually do it. And then it took multiple years after that, and, again, because of the timing of his second injury, it took a while to kind of build on that. But essentially, that initial exposure and connection through the community here kind of put the bug in Caleb's ear, and then he connected with a guy in Chilliwack named David Stanek, and he is starting up or has started up an adaptive paragliding program out of that area. It's adaptive airtime, and it's amazing. I would definitely recommend looking it up. It's really cool. They're doing tandem flights for people with all sorts of like mobility impairments. And I mean, like all sorts, like people that are aging and, you know, maybe their knees are gone, or he takes out people that have cancer, and kids, adults, a full range of disabilities. Like it's a really actually quite an accommodating sport that way when the trikes are used. And like with Caleb, you know, as a quadriplegic, he's got, you know, nothing from armpits down, and then, you know, limited function of arms and hands. And he can do it independently now. So that kind of speaks to how much that can actually be adapted, kind of once you're in the air. And, and if you just want exposure to it, go for a tandem with David, like look him up. It's well worth it. So then Caleb was kind of working with him, and through that we learned about a program down in Utah. And David's actually connected with them. I think they're affiliated with each other. The guy who runs the program in Utah and David are friends from like way back in the day kind of thing. And David learned from Chris, Santa Croce down in Utah. And he's been running an adaptive program down there for the last like at least 10, maybe 15 years, like quite a long time. And his story is pretty cool. But I don't know if we have time to get into that. But I would definitely, Chris's program down in Utah is called Project Airtime. And they do, tandems for people of different abilities. And then, he actually also has, like the ability to kind of like teach you how to fly, independently as well. And then he runs a shop and a flight school, down there called Superfly. So, we decided that I would go down there to learn, because the conditions are pretty, consistent down there, which is really nice. And, it gave us the ability to have Caleb fly and me learn, because he has kind of the capacity to manage that. And that turned out great for us.
That's sweet. So the two things I'm taking away from what you just said is, first of all, paragliding is a great opportunity for people with disabilities to get into a new activity, and it mirrors the sensations of skiing and snowboarding in powder. And I feel like Caleb, maybe don't quote me on this, but I feel like also too, the ability, like it kind of feels like you're carving at times.
Yeah. And like in whitewater even. Yeah. It can feel like you're carving. Yeah. It feels like I remember, my first thoughts were it feels a bit like the floatiness of a good powder day with a big fat ski.
Yeah.
And you're just like, you're floating. And then the more I learned about it, it definitely mirrors kayaking a bit as well. Similar feelings of like flow and floating, and engaging like kind of body movements that way. Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm describing it totally incorrectly, but those are the first few things that came to mind for me, and what kind of had me wanting to explore that more.
My memory is a little cloudy, but I did go down to Colombia about 8 years ago, and I did a tandem paraglide session.
Nice.
And the instructor was super cool. He actually asked me what my comfort level was with how we flew.
That's a good idea.
And I ran away. I said, man, I just want to do some fun stuff in the air.
Yeah.
And he was doing like all these like, I don't know if I'm going to use the right word, like aerobatic maneuvers in the air where we were like swinging around, and he was like, we were going from left to right, similar to carving on a ski or a snowboard, nice smooth transitions.
That's fun.
And it was a really good feeling from what I can still remember about it.
Yeah. I think the feeling, Yeah, especially with like a good tandem pilot too.
Yeah,
It can
he
be
was good.
like phenomenal.
Yeah, he was doing some really interesting maneuvers. I
Yeah.
don't even know how to explain them, but it felt like at times I was being like flipped around and
That's so cool. That's so much
Yeah.
fun.
yeah, it was pretty next level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to admit, flying solo is a little bit more nerve wracking.
Oh,
And I'm
yeah.
definitely not doing stuff like that. Probably not for a little while. But yeah, I hope to maybe like get to that. It would be cool. And I could appreciate that feeling that you're talking about. Yeah.
So, what is the accessibility for paragliding like here in Terrace for people with disabilities? Is it that accessible? Because I know where people do it, but in my mind, it doesn't feel like that area is very accessible.
I mean, yeah, it's not, to be frank. But I mean, there's like, we've been in conversations with the community here about how to make it more accessible, and they're super keen, like 100% keen to work towards that. I think, like you said, the location itself is kind of tricky to get to. It's going to maybe take, some really targeted work. And then there are a few kind of things that need to be in place, or, that it's ideal to have in place for it to be accessible to adaptive paragliding. But yeah, I think the potential is there. The current state is maybe not quite accessible, but I think if there's an interest and there's a willingness, then there's always the potential that it becomes more of a thing. And we did bring it, actually, we brought all the information about the site here to Chris down in Utah, and we had like a little kind of session where we did a bit of a site kind of assessment, and he's like, yeah, if you can make it to launch, like, and here's some things to think about. And so really it is just the logistical factor of getting to that site, getting the adaptive equipment in there, because it is a trike, it is a substantial size. It's maybe 2 people wide kind of thing.
And it probably weighs quite a bit.
Yeah, it weighs like 40 pounds.
Okay, well, that's
Yeah,
actually pretty light.
It's not bad.
No, that's,
And then, and then you're carrying kind of your gear, but then you also have to get your disabled human there. So there's another kind of factor. And I think there's a potential to make it good. It just, just needs the interest and the time and the resources to make it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, the kind of the buy-in.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, the buy-in, the planning, and it's easy to say like, oh yeah, we'll just like punch a trail in there, but like, oh, there's actually quite a bit that goes into that, and so I think there's a willingness to make it happen. We're coming into the winter months now, so managing expectations is important.
Yeah.
But in terms of the future potential of it, I think there's a potential to make it an accessible site.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's exciting. And I feel like there are people in this community that would be supportive in making that happen.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Like, yeah.
Like we have a pretty good community when it comes to like the disability community of people with disabilities and just able-bodied people in the community that want to support.
Yeah.
Adaptive
kind of recreation or sport.
Thank you. I was getting stuck with my words.
Yeah. And and sometimes adapting something like, everybody's needs are so different. It's hard to universally adapt anything. But getting it up to a point where access is possible is like a good step. And I think you're right. I think we do have the community support and the interest in trying to make it that way. Mm-hmm. And it's just a matter of like kind of coordinating that and getting that moving.
Yeah, definitely. So that's a little bit of a transition I want to make. It's something that we talked about in our audio podcast, the word disability, and we throw it around a lot. And I remember very distinctly in that conversation at that time, I was using the word diverse abilities, or I was a person with difference of ability. That's what I said.
Yeah.
And because at the time, I didn't like the word disability. But since then, I've grown into the acceptance of being a person with a disability, and not necessarily that being my identity, but part of who I am and how I show up in the world. And I'm now very vocal to people about the fact that I have a disability. And there's a quote here on my computer that I actually want to read. I came across and I found it very interesting that over in the Middle East, people with disabilities are called people with determination, which is way different in the Western world, where disability is kind of viewed as like a bad word and it's like disempowering. I would love to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, I think it's tough, right? Because words matter. And it's hard to find sometimes like the right terminology to describe something. I think I likely use the word disability because it's what I grew up with. So I have, from when I was a kid up until I think maybe when I was in my 20s, people started changing some of the terminology around that. And I just failed to adapt. But like, I think, I think for me, when somebody comes to me with a term, I try and look at the intent behind the statement, versus the words themselves at times, because, especially up here, you've got, you're old dudes or ladies, and, they didn't grow up with these terms, and they're maybe not familiar, and maybe they're not linked in, or they're kind of like me, or I feel a little old being like, I don't know what words to use now. I have to like Google that.
Yeah.
But like, whatever words I use, I never mean to disempower somebody or to take away from their identity or to make them feel less than. Like, I never want that to be the intention of anything when I communicate with somebody. And when I use the word disability, it's simply just the first thing that comes to mind for me. And it's how I would use it to describe myself. And if it does like kind of come across, if it's like challenging somebody or making them disempowered, I would hope they would let me know so that I could kind of like adjust in my communication to not do that with that individual. I think, I think you spoke to it really well when you said that whether you call it disability or difference in ability or, a loss of physical or a loss of function, I think, for me as well, it's always been just a piece of a whole. It's been a part of the whole. And maybe that's why I've not looked too deeply into calling it anything different, because it's kind of like, you're blonde or brunette or blue-eyed or tall or short or, and I have a disability, or I'm one-legged, or, like I've had old people use, cripple and invalid and not not with poor intentions. And, even those make me cringe, but maybe that was what was appropriate, back in like their day. And so, taking a second to think, for me at least, about like, what is the intent behind this statement? Is this like a learning moment for us all? Or is it not? Or, how can if somebody does use something and I'm kind of like, ooh, I don't know about that intent, and that really like hurt for some reason, how can I address that in a way that is like welcoming and will actually elicit change, versus kind of being like, you can't say that, be like, oh, ow, like, do you think there's another way of like presenting that? Or like, I don't know, trying to, people don't respond well or don't often change behaviors when they're approached with aggression or criticism. So like exploring what that means is sometimes like a better option. And I've had people do it with me, being like, "Oh, yeah, could you not use that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely. You may have to remind me once or twice," like, and through no malintent. But yeah, for me, that disability or difference in ability is a piece of a whole. And I think for some people, it's more of a piece of their identity, just like, maybe for some people being an artist or being a mountain biker is a big piece of their identity. For some people, their disability is a big piece of who they are. And for others, it's a different kind of piece. So I think, how we talk about it and the words we use can affect perceptions for sure. And I think, the quote there, a person, what was it with?
Yeah, it was
of determination.
So people in the Middle East call people with disabilities. What was it? Where is that? Right there. It's right there.
People with determination.
Determination.
I mean, that's nice. I like that. That's good. That's definitely one way of describing it, because you will need determination if you want to persevere. So that's fairly accurate. One thing I've noticed recently, which is interesting, is a tendency to maybe not acknowledge the difficulties of that disability. You have a difference in ability. You're like, yeah, but like it also kind of sucks. Mm-hmm. So like how, where's the line of acknowledging the suck that's associated with these differences sometimes, but not taking away from the individual or demoralizing that individual. And I don't know what that line is.
That is a tough one.
Yeah. Because sometimes I feel like also you get a lot of these like kind of sugar-coated stories of, oh, look how these people have, against all odds succeeded, or, all these really lovely kind of pieces. And that's very important, because it does take a lot of determination and a certain mindset. But I think it's also okay to acknowledge that not everybody's like that. Yeah. And, not all of us are going to be that inspirational story that everybody's looking for.
That Instagram adaptive superstar.
Yeah, right? Like, not everybody's going to be a Paralympian. Not everybody's going to be a superstar. Some people are just going to live their lives like normal people. Yeah. And that's actually cool. And that's fine. Mm-hmm. And you're just living. You're doing you, and you don't have, like, just because you have a disability or a difference in ability doesn't mean you need to try and do these things to fit the mold of what society expects of you. Mm-hmm. You just be you within that, and that's enough. Yeah. I think is something that I would like to hear more of. Like, and it's the fine line of, it's okay to just be living, be doing your thing. And if that thing involves all these other things, then great. Mm-hmm. But not everybody with a disability, I think, should be held to the standard of needing to be constantly pushing and constantly exceptional. And, sometimes we just are. Yeah. And that's okay too, and I think.
We're totally, everyone is exceptional in the different levels in how they live their life. Yeah.
And that's the thing too, like, just living life is its own experience that's worthy on as a standalone, regardless of how you choose to live that life. You're living a life. So I think that's kind of cool to, I don't know, embrace if you can. Yeah.
Which can be challenging.
Well, and I mean, we talk a lot about like my sports and stuff, but I do like the occasional old lady hobbies, if you want to call it that. And I love gardening. I like landscaping. I like growing vegetables. I love tomatoes, and kale. And, I like to grow things I can eat. And I spend a lot of my time kind of like in the summer months doing that. And it makes me very happy. And it does not involve excelling at it. Sometimes all my junk dies. This year, I didn't have a great garden. But, other years it works great. And so there's that, like, rounding out your your hobbies and what brings you joy, and being able to accept that it's okay to be a bunch of different things within the human you are.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. And just you were saying how much happiness, like being outside in your garden, growing your tomatoes brings you. And there's a lot to be said about how that is just like, it's an easy way to help with your mental health, which is another big component, for anyone, but especially people with disabilities. And also, it just helps with longevity as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, right? Like I did seed saving from tomatoes for the first time this year. We'll see if it works. I don't know yet. I won't know until I try and plant those seeds next year.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it helps with longevity and developing these hobbies that, are maybe not thrilling to the outside viewer, but that are actually kind of fun. And I was just talking with my little sister, who's maybe 5 years younger than me, and we were laughing about how we both actually kind of like puzzling a bit. Like we're not deep into building puzzles, but I think it came about last Christmas, and we were talking about, like, oh, what can we do with our mom who's aging and getting into her late 70s. And I was like, well, I actually really enjoyed like doing these puzzles way back, like a couple years back when Caleb was in rehab again. It was actually really kind of nice. We'd have this group around a puzzle and, be sorting the pieces and putting it together. And it was kind of that like calm, meditative, kind of relaxed flow state, just in a different way. And some people get it from knitting or gardening, and to kind of be okay with that.
Yeah.
Is something that I'm kind of enjoying, I guess.
I love that. I actually listened to a podcast recently of a guy who is a quadriplegic, and he was in his rehabilitation period, and he was speaking about how when you're in rehab, like your days look the same every day, and he was getting bored with how his days were looking, and he wanted to bring something different into his life, so he started painting. And although he didn't have function in his hands, he found a way to like put a pencil into his hand and slowly learned how to draw. And now he's a very talented artist. But I thought it was pretty cool how, he, he went from being this athlete to then being a person that picked up a different hobby.
Yeah.
And just like he adapted.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like what you're saying.
I think that's it, is you just kind of adapt to things. And hopefully you can do it in like a positive kind of meaningful way.
Yeah, definitely. So we're actually getting pretty close to wrapping this up. We filled our time quickly, faster than I was expecting. But I guess we have a few questions in front of us to kind of closing reflection. Are there either of those questions, do they speak to you?
Yeah, I thought you create very good questions. I think they're really insightful.
We have a computer in front of us right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. How do you define living your best life today? I think it's, just continuing to find a version of joy or happiness or meaning in some of the things you do. And it's tough. Like, we talked about good days and bad days, and, there, in my opinion, there's not necessarily like a perfect day or a best life. It's ever evolving. I think that's why I struggle with maybe those questions, is that,
it's a pretty deep answer.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah, right. Like your best life can change. Like what you want that to look like can change as you change as a being, like physically, emotionally.
Physically.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, living my best life, I look at the things that I value a lot, and it's like social connections and family connections and connecting to the outdoors and to nature. Like if I can keep kind of, and learning, I really do enjoy learning new things. So if I have those kind of broad categories, and I enjoy moving my body as much as I can, I find that to be an excellent stress relief, whatever that looks like, which is probably why I do a lot of sports. But, so if I can keep these aspects of moving my body and learning and being outside and also finding contentedness with calmer activities at times, that's what my best life would look like into the future, because each of those is broad enough they can be adjusted to the changes in my life. And then I like if I looked back at my younger self, what would I be telling her now? Just like, get ready, life's gonna kick you in the ass. You don't know. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah.
I feel you.
But like in the best of ways and the worst of ways, right? Like, just it's gonna be a ride. Life is a bit of a trip.
Yeah.
And you're just gonna take that journey, gonna take that trip.
Yeah, I mean, because like we're not that old. We're in our late 30s, approaching 40, but we've seen and done enough already where we can reflect and give some valuable information on either our younger self or like younger people.
Yeah.
I do find myself sometimes saying to like younger persons, like, like maybe think about doing this or think about that, or
Yeah.
like for people, like for yourself, like, okay, so for me, I've lived with this medical condition now for a while, and there are younger people in the online community that I'm part of that have this condition, and I have the experience now to say to them, like, maybe you should do this to like just help with your mobility and your strength and your mental well-being.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself giving that kind of information to people with like people that are
Either younger or share.
Yeah, or share similar experiences as yourself?
I mean, I definitely feel the urge to sometimes. And I am still linked into communities kind of more relating to my disability. So like the War Amps in Canada run a child amputee program. And I was very involved in their program growing up as a child amputee, and then in their like youth and mentorship and kind of educational programs as I got older into my like teen years and 20s. And I stay connected into their online communities. And I do enjoy sharing information, especially, if it's somebody that has a very similar kind of situation to you. And I think one of the ones recently for me was somebody who's had a very similar, like a child with a similar amputation. And they were trying to figure out how to ride a bike. And I was like, okay, so like, please don't duct tape your child's leg to the bike like my parents did.
Oh my God.
You may want to consider these other options.
Wow.
But like, and props to them. It did kind of work. But so I do find I do enjoy sharing if that's something that's welcomed, like in those communities. I do find value in that. Sharing with other people, like just in general, I think maybe you probably get approached. I get approached in public probably more often than I'd like at times, but that's okay. Sometimes, yeah.
You probably do, whereas I don't, because mine is
a little more invisible. Yeah. And so like, we're road tripping down in the States and other people with amputations would like come up to me at different points, we're in touristy areas at times and want to share their story and then have kind of questions. And I'm usually very happy to kind of engage in that. And in an appropriate way, without dedicating too much time or without over assuming. But yeah, I do like sharing the information, and I think there is some value in having lived with whatever's going on for a couple of years or for a lifetime in a lot of ways. And yeah, you can kind of offer some insight and hope that maybe it's received in a way that's beneficial. And I think giving back to the community is important, just like anything, right? You have your trail days for your mountain bike clubs, giving back to the community of like disability or different abilities, especially when it kind of directly relates to what's going on in your own body, is pretty valuable for both sides, I think. I had people warn me about, take care of your knee, and I completely disregarded them because I don't like authority. No, but, and here I am with knee problems. But like at the same time, I was warned, and just sometimes that more gentle, consistent input, that directing, have you considered, have you, maybe try that. I think, that brings back value to both sides. And, I would like to engage in more of that if time allowed. And,
So just in closing, I'd like to ask, we live in a smaller community in the northwest region of BC. We're not super close to any big cities. Like Prince George is the closest one. What resources are available for people that have, I don't know if I'm going to use the right terminology.
Now we're all freaked out about it.
But like a limb difference, or
just like an amputation, limb. I think limb difference is probably the most like modern term.
So like, what resources are available for a person that has either had a limb difference for a long time, or it's a new area that they're entering?
Yeah, I think it's, like you said, it's really challenging up here. Like for myself, in terms of like the real basics of, say, getting a prosthetic, I still work with Barber Prosthetics down in Vancouver right now, and I have for a few years. And for me, it's easier to get on a flight to Vancouver than it is to drive to Prince George to deal with these types of things. And because I had, because we lived down there briefly when Caleb was in rehab, and prior to that, we were living in Whistler before we moved here. It's a long time ago now, though. But anyways, so I mean, if you think about that, anytime I need kind of significant maintenance on a prosthetic, that's it's a 16 or 17 hour drive or a 2.5 hour flight one way. And it's expensive. It's really expensive, and there's not a ton of means to recover that money, or grants or anything like available to cover that. You've got your disability tax credit, you've got your medical expenses that you can write off your taxes, but it only really puts a dent in, like the smallest little dent in it, and if you earn enough, where like, and there are, I think, some charities in the area, like Hope Air, that may assist if you kind of were really in a tight spot and approach them. But I think, the closest place that would touch prosthetics is Prince George. And so that's a 6-hour one-way drive. So I budget for my things, and I try and tack it on to other obligations, and almost every time we're down in Vancouver, I'm sliding in for like a tune-up. But it's challenging and it's expensive. And there's not a lot of support that way, especially when you kind of have that like middle income range, like you're not on disability benefits, you're working, but you're not making a ton of money. There's really nothing like out there. But in terms of like if you wanted to be going through like rehab, there's like lots of good physios in town. There's lots of good like massage therapists that are able to like help with those aspects, chiropractors. So I think we do have these extra, those types of professionals that help. For me, like I know going to massage and physio and chiro helps manage the different challenges, like for my like the scoliosis and the strain that having a prosthetic puts on the rest of my body.
Yeah.
So having regular access to that is really helpful. I'm sure there's occupational therapists and that kind of thing. I think, I don't know. I'm not sure of a ton of actually dedicated adaptive recreation programs up here. I think all the programs, are willing to try and to look into it. But I mean, we're kind of few and far between. And so that's the other challenge is when it's only kind of a one-off here and there, it's hard to expect a resource to be available. But it would be really nice to see, some sort of like, I don't know, grants or something that can compensate like people with challenges like disabilities living, in more remote and rural places to access those services. Like, and something that doesn't necessarily involve charities picking up the slack, that it seems it's great that they do. It's absolutely like, the nonprofit and charities that make these things possible really are making it possible. But how cool would it be if that was just the standard?
Right.
And that the charities could then focus on even further improving the living conditions in other ways for people. But so I don't know if that really answers the question.
No, it does.
Do you have services here that you access?
No, actually, and I was thinking the other day how it would be nice to live in a city and have access to more resources. But
then you gotta live in a city.
Well, then you have to live in a city, but even more so, I'm part of this group on Instagram. It's called the Addison's Disease Organization, which is part of AAA syndrome. It's one of the syndromes. There's 3. And Addison's disease is more prevalent over in the UK. There's more people over there that have it than here in Canada. And they have like communities and all kinds of resources and access to doctors that are more specialized in it. And I was thinking, I actually said to my mom the other day, who's from England.
Yeah, like, should I go back?
Hey, let's go live in England.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it would be better for me to be over there and like be around all these people, because I've really been struggling as of lately, feeling alone.
Yeah.
With this condition, especially as I'm getting older, and my parents are getting older, and I leaned on them heavily when I was younger, so I don't want to get like into an emotional talk, but sometimes I think it would be nice to be in a bigger center where there are more resources and maybe you can feel like there's more community.
I think there's an element of that. Yeah. I think our communities do the best, that they can with the limited resources and the limited exposure. I think in larger populated areas, there will always be more at the cost of living in a larger populated area. And it's a shame that sometimes those are the types of choices we end up having to make. And sometimes I find when I feel like that, I can appreciate that alone feeling. Sometimes you feel like you're very alone in your experiences, and especially like with yours being so unique, I can't imagine that struggle. And trying to in the past I've described it as like you feel like you're on the top of the mountain and it's like a whiteout condition and the snow is swirling and there's no reference points and you're just up there trying to deal with and
I love that. I'm gonna use that.
And it's hard, and wishing that there may be more, but knowing that you're gonna have to probably create that. And it's hard. It's hard. And that's something that, when I start to feel that way is when I start to try and reach out more. And to even just, like not necessarily people with my disability. Sometimes like online, I will do that, or just to my friends and my family, so that even if they don't understand, because they may never understand, then, but there's a version of connection there. And it's like, I might not understand the mountaintop you're standing on, or, the conditions that you're dealing with daily, but I like you for you, and I'm here for you.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of connection I thankfully have with my friends, and family and Caleb. But yeah, sometimes I can appreciate, it would be nice even just to go to like a conference, to go for a little visit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a tough one. And I don't know what the solution is to that.
Yeah. I think the solution to that, as I think about it, and thinking how nice it would be to go over to England and connect with these other people, is to, well, maybe I shouldn't say this, I'll say it in a different way, to win the lottery. I was thinking of ways to make money, and some of them, well, they're questionable. So
what,
yeah,
like footfinder.com?
well,
no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
But no.
I was thinking maybe like rob a museum, like what happened over in, I think, Europe recently. Where, like, they stole a bunch of diamonds
from the Louvre.
midday.
That's wild. Yeah, I read about that. But I think maybe that's it, and that's part of why Caleb and I are willing to travel to these places. Why we just traveled to Utah, because there's the resources and the community, and people with similar challenges, doing this thing that we really want to be part of. And so, maybe it's not possible to move one place or another quite yet, but maybe it is possible to go for a bit of a visit if you can, or to try and engage in that way, so that you're filling your cup in some capacity and in that way, and then able to come back and that's something I'm learning more about, is ways to meet these needs, right? The need for connection, the need for people with similar experiences. And if that can't be met because of distance or time or resources, like, how do I build the other areas of my life so that area that can't be supported right now doesn't feel so big? And it's hard. It's like, you're just a constant okay, so I would love to have a whole group of one-legged people, we all go, hopping around. But in the meantime, I'm gonna, engage with the people that I have. I'm gonna, go to the online communities if I have them there too. I'm gonna look for opportunities to engage in sport, with or engage in the way that I want to with those communities. So going to Utah to paraglide, or when I was down there, an old friend of mine from the ski team lived quite a distance away, I guess, 6 hours away, but we agreed on each driving 3 hours, and
Cool.
Reconnecting with that. She's also got one leg. We did a impromptu 2.5 hour hike that we shouldn't have done, but and we can spend the whole time just connecting that way. And there's only so many people you can talk to that really get the specifics of your disability sometimes. And for me, just having that day with her was so fulfilling. And so I can imagine the desire to have that. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe that community can host an event, or you can plan a trip if possible to try and or plan something here.
And I think maybe that's just the answer is you just have to make it happen when you don't have those resources or those communities readily available to you.
Yeah.
You just, it's going to be an expense, but it's going to be a beneficial expense.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like for you, when you were down in Utah, meeting up with this friend was very beneficial. It was a great experience. It's something that is going to forever last in your memory.
Yeah, right. And so, it's easy to say, oh, just go do this, because like you said, you need to have the money, win the lottery, do the crazy planning.
Yeah.
But also sometimes it's nice to have a big goal like that. And even if it's 5 years out, I'm gonna, or 3 years out or whatever, I'm gonna try and make this happen. Then it's something to work towards that might be fulfilling in that way. And yeah.
I love it.
Cool.
Well, that was great, Andrea. I appreciate it. We talked about a lot of cool things, and I think the audience is going to find it very entertaining and valuable. And in saying that, I just want to say thank you again for being on the pod, and rock and roll.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a good chat. I like it.
Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please share it with others. Slow, steady, strong. You got it.